Buenas.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is gonna be hard. There's plenty of us here. I'm a bit nervous. I'm gonna try to encourage you not to be anxious. I'm gonna encourage them to participate because has to be somehow a conversation, even though we're here in a row. Let's try to imagine we are in a cafeteria and we talk about things that we all enjoy, okay? We don't have much time. There's plenty of them, and actually you know all of them. I'm not going to introduce them, just name them, okay? So that you see who's who. Because with this talk, I have two main goals. On one side, I'm sure that you're coming to see your favorite author, right? So, which is great. But this is also the chance, you have the chance to get to know other people. And this is actually one of the main goals of the festival, to get to know new authors. So I wish you discover great creators. Their books are here in the bookstore, and maybe you can get the book signed. The other goal is to enjoy it, both on the stage and on the audience, in the audience. So we have here, I start, it was just no order, just let it flow. We have here Anna Starobínets. Bovalino, right? Did I pronounce it right? Okay. Anna, Amal El-Mohtar. Stella, Tack. Oh, you see. I'm sorry, I swear words, and I'm so ridiculous sometimes. Okay, Stella, Tack, Claire North, Fonda, Victoria Schwab, Frances Hardinge. I always said it the Spanish way, Hardinge. Horrible. Frances Hardinge. Okay, and finally, we have here Anna Smith-Sparks. Big round of applause for all of them. Yes, of course, they deserve this applause. I'm anxious. I'm trying to keep it slow because I just rush with. It is just such an honor, such a pleasure to moderate this table, and I say it really from the depth of my heart. And I hope I don't fall into the typical questions. By the way, my name's Susana Vallejo. I'm also a writer, and this year I'm co-curator of Festival 42. Co-curator, it's like Coco, like I'm Coco. Yes, I like to be co-curator. Okay, stop. I'll start with you. I'm gonna just launch one single question to all of you, and then just try to imagine we are sitting in a cafeteria. Let's try to make, to pretend that we're friends, that we've known each other all our lives long. I've read some of your books, not all. I have to be honest. So maybe you tell us things, and maybe get to talk about new things that have not come up in other talks. Let's start with philosophy. Let's start to talk about life. In this festival and in other panels, we've been addressing one of the biggest topics of literature, not only in fantasy, but general topics from the 20th and 21st century, which is identity. Identity not in your books, but identity in you, your writers. Yeah, but when did you consider yourself a writer? And you said, I'm a writer. Maybe you still don't consider yourself a writer, you should, but when was the moment? When did you start writing? Who wants to start? Anna, you want to start?
Not that I want, but I can. Okay, but that's an easy one. I understood that I was a writer when I was 4 years old. And as soon as I discovered that I'm a writer, I immediately wrote a book. It is very short, so I can tell you. Do you want to hear the book?
Yeah.
Okay, but you need to know that I lived in Moscow, and my childhood was a bit Soviet. I was visiting a Soviet kindergarten, so and it made a little impact on the story. So there were 3 frogs. One was red, another one was green, and the third was yellow. And they only had one pillow for all of them. so they couldn't sleep normally at night. And they had no way to figure out who would be the owner of the pillow. They tried to kick each other, and they tried many things, but they were their strength was equal. So finally, they decided to. I forgot the English for that. When you
pull. Pull.
Yeah, pull those sticks. The one who pulled the short stick would would be the winner. So, and that is the end of the book. And of course, no. The last sentence is important. Of course, the winner was the red frog, because you know that red are always winners.
4 años. Ana, ¿y cuándo te sentiste?
And when did you feel as a writer? When did you say, I am a writer?
Oh my God! Wow! What is? Have I produced that sound? Well, the first time was at that age, at 4 years old. The next one was at 21. After I gave birth to my older daughter, I was extremely scared by that. And I was afraid that actually my life is finished. And then well, it's absolutely true, I'm not joking, I suddenly remembered that the 4-year-old situation, and that I was intending to become a writer, which I didn't. I became a journalist, and then I decided that I need to somehow to have this goal again. So I wrote my first collection of short stories when my daughter was I think I started when she was 2 weeks old, and I finished when she was half a year old. Una edad difícil. It was translated into...
Tori?
So I think that the first time that I kind of considered myself to be one was when, also like you, I was really, really little. But I thought that to write a book, one must make the book. So I would basically not write anything until I had folded over a packet of paper together, because I thought that was how, books work. Somebody was in a little warehouse folding all of them and then writing them as they went. Mm-hmm. So that was where I started when I was probably around the same, so somewhere between 4 and 8, and then I just started, making all these little books and leaving them at my grandma's house, who indulged me in this plight. And then I don't think I really considered doing it seriously until I was in university, and it was something that I had tried to stop doing for a really long time, because I thought, okay, well, now I'm going to go and get a degree and do something with it, and then I won't write anymore. And then it was just one of those things that I couldn't stop doing, and then, you start to think of it as, well, what if I actually do this for a job? So I think that kind of followed, and then here we are, a few years later.
I love the folding. It's not untrue, right? It's just a matter of scale.
That's how they make books. Someone's been there, folding paper.
Yeah. For me, similarly to what you were, I was also very young. I was 7, which I know because I feel like I've been telling a version of this story for some time. But when I was 7, I wrote a poem to the moon, and I will actually recite it because I do remember it, and it is short. It was, O moon, why art thou so pale? The sun is large and golden, but you are as white as hail. I'm so glad these jokes are like art thou ill from the cold and dark of night, or does your face, I was not consistent with the these and thous, or does your face turn pale thinking of your plight? But whether you are golden or whether you are pale, I think you are beautiful and not as harsh as hail. Was my poem. And I think the normal reaction to this from one's parents would be a kind of gentle indulgence, like, well done. So precocious. Like, you read The Hobbit, and you read this, like, children's digest of A Midsummer Night's Dream that made you want to put these and thous in something. Good job. But that was not their reaction. Their reaction was very solemn and very serious. And they said, you know, your grandfather was a poet. And then they kind of imparted to me this lineage of my grandfather was a poet, he was also a revolutionary, and those two things were very synonymous. So to be a poet was to bear this responsibility and to take on a mantle of speaking truth to power and speaking for people who couldn't speak for themselves because of being oppressed or marginalized. And you know, when you're 7 and someone kind of offers you this path to walk, to be a kind of hero in the world, it's very enticing. And I was like, yeah, this is what I will do. I'm going to be a writer. And I think I specifically thought poet rather than writer, right? But I had also read The Hobbit by Tolkien, and there was like a biographical note at the back that said that Tolkien had started writing poetry and then short stories and then novels. And that just seemed like a very logical progression to me. Like, this is how you become a writer. You start with poetry, you write short fiction, then you write novels. And I'm somewhere between the short fiction and the novels currently. So, but I will follow that with saying that, and that was like the start, a moment where I realized I had to be a writer was I was working in a bookstore in Ottawa, and I was opening the store, and I found that I was just feeling very happy. Like, I was weirdly aware of feeling just at ease, joyful, peaceful, in a way that was just so remarkable to me. And I was like, why do I feel so happy? This is weird. And then I realized it was because I'd finished a story the night before. And I was just kind of walking around with this like euphoric, wow, I finished a story feeling. And I remember very clearly thinking to myself, like in the back of the bookstore I was opening, if nothing else has ever made me feel like this, so I'd better keep doing this. And that's basically it.
Una escritora.
Oi, oi, oi.
Y entre paréntesis, poeta. Stella.
The answers give me anxiety. I'm not the first of... yeah, okay. So.
Son los focos.
Okay. Where do I start? Buenas noches, chicas y chicos. Today I learned that chicos is a thing. I was like doing it as a joke, and I was like, really? Chicos? Yeah. So, hi, I'm Stella. So, okay. I am also the part of an author who started at a really young age. I think I was also 4, but I was not a clever kid. So I dictated my mother what to write, and it was not that great, really. It was about seagulls who fell in love with each other and built a tiny birdhouse. And the end.
I'm invested.
And they got kids, okay?
Good. I was like, do they live
3 eggs. But it was going on the wrong side open. It was, I made a manga. Oh. Yeah, I made a manga. This was my first book, and I felt like the greatest author in the world. I knew it was meant for great things. You know, the world just doesn't see it. And I was always a really, really open kid, and I always tried to do many things, but never normal things. And I always tried to write. The only thing is I have dyslexia. So I was always a really bad student. Yeah. And everyone told me, no, Stella, you're too dumb. Literally told me you're too dumb to do anything about it. And I was always like, yeah, but writing, I'm sure the mistakes, there are people for that. I'm gonna write the good thing and everyone is editing it, okay? I was always really clear, and I was like, I was furious in school that my teacher, you know, disowned me with my, I wrote five pages, you know, and I should get an A and then a 5. Yeah, we get 5s in Germany. And I continued to write, and I published my first book when I was 19, and it was highly not successful. Like, no one was reading it. When you Google it, it's embarrassing. Please don't do it. But
I think the failure was good for me, you know, because it taught me what not to do. So I really had to guess around what do I need to do to be really a writer? What are the essence of writing? And I continued to doing that. And actually, the first time I really felt as really a writer was when I was 22, because I was the youngest best-selling author in Austria, actually. Yeah, my first romance novel became a huge success, and this is because I'm sitting here. I got a call in a train station, and I was like, I'm an author! I'm famous! I made it! Yeah, this was the first time I really felt that. Yeah, yeah. Please talk. Please talk more intelligent than I did.
Beautiful friends on this side of the room. Please tell me that one of you didn't decide to be an author when you were a child. Save us. Fonda, please, no, save us first. We can come back. Oh, damn it. I was first published when I was 14. Don't do what we do. Do whatever Fonda is about to tell you to do. It's a terrible idea. Thankfully, I don't believe myself to be a writer. Obviously, I write books for money, but leave that aside for a second. I don't believe myself to be a writer because my parents were publishers and they taught me that all writers are the worst people in the world. They are egotistical, self-obsessed, and when they're not doing that, they're at home under their duvets going, no one loves me. My latest book wasn't a triumph. Everyone hates me.
But that's true.
Yeah, we can all agree. Yeah, see, everyone here agrees. So I've gone a long time trying to pretend I'm not a writer. I am also a lighting technician, and in my other job, I can go up to many technicians and say, yo, I wrote in a book, man. And they'll go, right. Cool, well, let's talk about something different right now, which is a very valid response, because if someone comes up to you in the street and says, I've written a book, your alarms go off. You know you're headed to trouble. You go, okay, is it about an unhappy love affair you had? It is. Are you trying to reconcile your emotions about your ex-girlfriend? You are. Would pottery make you happy? So, like, writers, bad. I have internalized that. It's too late for me to shake that off. I will say, as a kid, obviously I did the classic thing. I read lots of books. I read many of the giants of science fiction and fantasy. But I was also young enough that there weren't that many women yet doing it. So in honor of this panel, shout out to some of the women who paved the way. Thank you, Ursula Le Guin. Thank you, Anne McCaffrey. Thank you, Marion Simondown. Queens. Save us.
All right, I will do the obligatory saving. I came to writing as a second career.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. So I came to writing as a second career. I had an entire other career in business. I was seriously writing starting in my 30s. I was first published when I was 36. I'm now 46, and I've just turned in my 12th novel. And so I did not think of myself as a writer until after I was a debut author. And even then, I would say I am a business consultant. Because no one asks you questions after that. For the longest time, early in my career, people would be like, oh, what do you do? And I would be like, what do I say? What do I say? Because if you say I'm a writer, it invites the inevitable question of, oh, are you published? Have you written anything I would know? To which the answer, was well, this is too long of a, I don't want to talk about it. So it was nice to have this fallback, because I actually did, when I transitioned from my first career to my second, I fired myself, but it took a while to fire myself. Because I had a role where I hired someone else to do my job part of the time, and then after I was actually making sort of a bit of money as a writer, then I was able to just quit my job, but hire myself, but work as a freelance consultant. And then over time, I just did less and less of that. So I had this period where I wasn't anything. I didn't think of myself as a writer yet, but I had quit my job, and so I was just kind of just saying consultant, because that's so vague that nobody would answer. But I think, you know, when I look back on it all, right, that there's the moment when you realize that you want to be a writer, you are a writer, and then there's the time when you are willing to admit it publicly. And for me, that was the span of about 25 to 30 years. Because there is that time, you know, I'd always loved reading, loved writing, would write stories for myself, would write on the bus, because I didn't have, you know, an iPhone or a tablet or anything to distract myself electronically when I was a child. And so I wrote stories. I had a coil-bound notebook, and I wrote stories. And I would write in college. I would write fan fiction in college. I would write, but writing didn't make me a writer. At least that's what I thought at the time. Right? And so there was an identity switch that had to be flipped. And for some writers, it happens in a moment. It happens when you see your book on the shelf, or it happens when you get that first book deal, or whatever it is, there is an external trigger. And for other people, it's a slow process. It's a process where you just kind of recognize that, and you embrace it, and you're like, you delete your LinkedIn profile, which for me was a very big milestone. Like, I'm not going back to the office ever again. And that was when I was like, well, I can't say I'm a business consultant anymore. I guess I am a writer by default.
I love that. Can you hear me? Yeah. I love that. My favorite is when people ask anything I would have read, and I say, what's the last thing you read? And they can't think of an answer. And I'm like, well, then
I guess not.
Chances are no. I am a little bit of an amalgamation of everything so far. I never considered myself a writer. As a child, I was a storyteller. I like to invent things. I like to make people act out films and plays. I like to draw comics. Everything was always incorporative. I wasn't a writer. And then I went from being a storyteller as a child to wanting to be an author. And the difference in my mind between writer and author is writing is something you do for yourself. You can write every day of your life and always be valid as a writer. Author is a profession. Author requires a degree of narcissism because you not only want to write, you want to be read. It's life. Okay? You want to tell stories, and that implies an audience. And I have always, from the moment that first time a book played as a movie in my head instead of words on paper, wanted to have that impact on other people. So I never set out to be the writer. The writer was the in-between thing that's just for you, but I never wanted it to be just for me, because the thing that made it intoxicating was that it was a hallucinative spell you cast on other people. So I've always wanted to be an author, but from the moment I wanted to be an author, which was at age 19, I worked towards that. And I've never really looked back. So I skipped. I never at any point was comfortable considering myself a writer. It was never a thing I really did for me. And then I considered myself an author once, I'd say like probably 5 or 6 books in.
Okay. Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. I was another of the little proto-authors. Yes. I was incredibly shy, and I have some stories that I wrote at the time. I was describing some of these to people earlier. There's a nice little poem called The Night Dragon, about this jet-black dragon that swoops through the skies and then descends on cities to eat nocturnal pedestrians. And there's a little story I wrote, and I know I was 6 when I wrote that, just half a page long. And during the course of the story, there's an attempted poisoning. Somebody fakes their own death, and then the villain falls to his doom off a cliff. So, I mean, I was this tiny little shy, nosy thing, the sort of child that people would come up to and go, "Oh, what are you writing?" It's about a murder. Okay. So, looking back, I think I was a kind of creepy horror movie child. So yes, my stories were dark even then. And then I think I wrote my first novel that I actually finished, short novel, when I was 13, by hand, in a pad, in pencil. And it was a spy thriller, strongly influenced by Hitchcock, with a 13-year-old spy. And I had car chases, and I didn't know much about cars. And kind of police procedurals, which I didn't know much about. And listening devices that I didn't know. You're noticing the theme here. This was a while ago. I had no internet. I couldn't research. But I was proud of it and desperately self-conscious, and I still haven't shown it to anybody. I only actually mustered the courage to start sending off my short stories when I was 16. And my books are quite weird. They are not as weird as the stuff I sent off when I was in my teens. I actually had to tone things down a bit in order to make myself more comprehensible to the rest of my alleged species. One of my favourite bits of feedback for one of the stories I sent off when I was a teenager was, "We really liked your story. We wish we knew what it was about." Okay.
Is that the note in which you wish to end?
Oh, sorry. I guess the point which I felt more like, probably as if I'd actually become to be an actual author, was the first time I actually got a response that was not a rejection.
Oh.
That was in my early 20s, and it was a short story, and it was accepted by a magazine that couldn't pay me and could just about afford to send me a copy of the magazine in a, "Here you are, oh, that hurt," sort of way. Don't look for it's called Dream Zone, it doesn't exist anymore.
I remember Dream Zone. Oh, sorry. Anyways.
Okay, so, yeah, my story... My father is a poet, and in fact there's a kind of weird direct link between my father and the person he studied poetry under, who studied poetry under Ezra Pound. So I kind of grew up in this incredibly privileged, rarefied world in which everyone my parents knew were poets or artists or creators of some kind. And unlike Claire, I grew up believing that to write or to create was the only possible purpose of human existence, that if one does not write or paint or do something creative, there is no meaning in life. And I told myself stories from the moment I could speak. I was telling myself stories, always what I now consider fantasy and science fiction, basically fan fiction based around the Celtic myths, the Viking myths, strange dreamscape worlds. I'm dyslexic. I have little books I wrote when I was a child. They are utterly illegible. I was the last person in my class to learn to read and write. I remember not being able to read and write, and almost everybody in my class could read and write. But I was compulsively telling myself stories all the time. It was all I did with myself. I had no friends. I just told myself stories, wrote stories. Which makes me sound like the most like, you were writing when you were 2, I was writing like when I was 1. Except I then, in my late teens, had a total mental breakdown. I was absolutely in a really, really, really bad state, self-harming, kind of really, it looked as though I might not be able to do my qualifications at one point, and I stopped writing. And, I mean, I did stuff, I got my qualifications, I went to university, in fact, I got a PhD, but I stopped writing fiction completely to the point that I desperately wanted to write. I would go into bookshops and I would see books by people like the lovely people here, and it would feel like a physical pain inside me that they could write. But, you know, this idea, if I sat down writing, like, seriously, the sky would open and this lot would appear and be like, whoa, you think you can write a book, you? And this went on for my entire adult life. I mean, it was really painful. And people kept buying me books, like, oh, this is a really interesting book by this really interesting new female author, you'll really like it. And I'm like, just pour lemon juice on it, why don't you? Kind of dagger in my heart. And this went on, I had children. I had extreme postnatal depression after my first child was born. I mean, I was suicidal. And it was pointed out to me by a Jungian psychotherapist and bodywork therapist of all people, that I was probably autistic. And I was diagnosed as not only dyslexic and dyspraxic, which means I have coordination issues. I'm right-handed, I type with this finger. That's I do everything else, but I type with this finger. And that I was also autistic. I was diagnosed as autistic in my 30s, and it was like the world changed for me, just that diagnosis. And one day, my son would only sleep, both my children would only sleep being pushed around in a pushchair. So I spent an awful lot of time sitting in cafes and things with a sleeping child in a pushchair. And one day, I just started writing. And this scene came into my head. There were men in the desert. There was this language around heat and dryness and sterility and male violence and the kind of homoeroticism of a lot of very sweaty, angry military men in a desert. And a dragon turned up. And I started writing it, and I got to the point where I was describing the dragon, and this kind of Joycean frenzy of words describing the dragon and the experience of being killed by a dragon came out. And from that moment, I was writing compulsively, like every moment I could, which wasn't very many moments, given I had a job and two very young children. And in a year, I had what was then the God of Broken Knives. And that was the most intense experience of my entire life. It was the most intense year of my entire life. It was like everything changed. And then I had an agent and had a book deal, and I have not stopped writing since. But I would not actually I find it very difficult to say I'm a writer. The idea, I've spent all day thinking like everyone else is going to be like, what is she doing on the panel? She can just go there. Because I would never, it's very difficult for me to say I'm a writer. But it is the only thing that gives my life meaning now. But I don't write. I'd never consider it a career. I do not consider myself a career writer. I consider myself someone who is incredibly lucky enough to have had people publish my books. But yeah, it's a kind of strange... So don't give up hope, basically. Don't sit here thinking, well, I didn't want to write when I was 4. Kind of, yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want to write, write. If you don't want to write, don't write. Don't be afraid.
Gracias por vuestras historias.
Thanks for your stories. We've seen writing as a refuge, the difference between feeling and being a writer, which is very connected to the profession, and also the influence of a family, and many points, many common denominators. It took just ages because it's plenty of us here. And now I'm going to combine 2 questions just to delve deeper into this idea. So now that you're a writer, that you write, why fantasy? And what are your fears and why fantasy? And yes, I will start with Anna. Sorry.
Fantasy is the only thing I've ever written. It is kind of, I guess, fantasy and dreams. I mean, as I said, I told myself these stories compulsively when I was a child. I would see an image from one of those beautiful books of Viking mythology or Celtic mythology or kind of, the beautiful illustrated version of Tolkien or something that, again, I was incredibly lucky to be surrounded by. And I would immediately just want to go off and tell stories and immerse myself in that. I write because it's the closest thing to living that life. I genuinely kind of still believe that one day I will go out deep into the English moors, the high moor, wild places, and the hollow hills will open. I kind of really genuinely believe that it's all out there, and I just always turn away too quickly. And if I just stay for one moment longer, it will all be there. So I write because it's the closest thing I can get to living it. I write it, and I am briefly living it through a kind of mediation of the words. And when the words are happening, and when I'm writing well, and I know I'm writing well, and I can feel it, I'm like, physically, I am nearly there, and I'm shaking writing it because I am in that world, and I am fighting those battles, and I am being those characters, and I am living it. And that's why fantasy, because it is writing a world which is so much huger and more wonderful and romantic and terrifying and amazing than the reality of being a person with a 3-day-a-week job as a petty bureaucrat and 2 kids and a tiny, filthy house.
Ana, perdona que te interrumpa.
Sorry, can I interrupt you, Francis? So these places, Anna, don't only exist in your mind. You make them happen. You make them real in the mind of your readers. You see? They are seeing these worlds, you see?
That is part of the appeal to me. I love creating worlds. In fact, I may have a bit of an addiction. That is possibly why I have so many standalone novels. Because when I've used one for a book, I like to throw it away and start building a new one. I mean, there are many answers to why I write fantasy. One is the joy of world building. And that ever subversive question, what if the world is not as it is? And the absolute freedom it offers you as a writer. But an honest answer is that it's just the way my imagination works. Fantastical stories come to my mind much more easily than realistic ones. If I want to talk about something important or weighty or with a deep emotional resonance, doing so through fantasy just comes more naturally to me. The stories that come into my head and haunt me and demand to be written are fantastical. It just seems to be how my mind works.
Yeah, in addition to, I mean, that is absolute truth for me on both of those counts. If I want to give an extra reason to give you something different, it's that similarly when I told you that I skipped wanting to be a writer and wanting to be an author because I essentially wanted to control the hallucination that you have, that's why fantasy, because the challenge for me is to make you believe that magic is real. And the trick to that is not actually making you believe that magic is real, it's making you doubt that reality is. It's so much easier because all I have to do is plant a tiny kernel of doubt and you can't disprove that. So it starts to worm its way into your mind, that little what if, and you start to go, well, I'm 99% sure it isn't real, but what if? So I just like the challenge of trying to see if I can trick you for a little while into doubt.
My answer is pretty simple. I just write what I want to read. And I've always just loved reading fantasy. Growing up, fantasy and science fiction, that was just my go-to genre. That was the section of the library that I just hung out in until my mom picked me up from school when the library closed. And so that's fundamentally why I do it, because at the end of the day, every one of my books is just a book I wanted to read, but I couldn't find that book, and so I had to write it myself. Maybe a deeper answer would be that I love how fantasy is a way for me to create distance between the real world and the things that I want to talk about. So there are so many things in our world that I observe and that I want to put into a narrative, and pulling it into a fantasy world allows me to do that. So, the world of the Greenbone saga, yes, it is very analogous to post-World War II and the economic development of East Asia at that time, and all the Cold War politics and modernization and technological progress and globalization and all of that. But it's not our world. I don't have to be true to the world. I can cherry pick the things that I want out of our world and remix them and do something new with them. And that's why I love it. It's just because I don't even have to be true to facts. I can do research and be like, just ignore that.
Everyone is going to be able to answer the why fantasy question more beautifully and eloquently than me. So I'm going to pick up on the first part of the question, fear. Hands up everyone on this stage who fears the day that our publisher turns around and goes, I'm never going to buy it and no one's ever going to read your book ever again.
Hey! Hey.
We are all going to die in a car park behind Carrefour. We all know it. And on that sense, one of the reasons I said I'm not a writer is because writer is an identity, and all identity, as the Buddha teaches us, is a trap. What will we be when we are not writers? We will be ex-writers. We will be washed-up writers. We will be alone in the world going, no, not reality. So I think terror suffuses our joy. But on the theme of writing being an identity and therefore a trap, we should also make it very obvious, I think, that gender is obviously identity and therefore a trap. So shout out to the neurodiverse queer community of nerds who make events like this what they are. Yeah, and also if you're looking at all of us and thinking, what incredible women, then thank you very much. But also, the idea that women's fantasy is somehow innately different from men's fantasy, I think there's enough diversity in the lot of us here to kick that one also into the car park of the Carrefour. Now please raise the tone with the joy of fantasy.
So, my mom was an artist, and a crazy artist. I was the kid grew up talking with trees, and talking with fairies, and talking with everything except human. I grew up seeing magic. My mom increased that a lot. Yeah. It was always easier for me to talk with an elf than talk with an actual human because I was a weird kid. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in Austria. So we have mountains and we have traditions. And being the weird kid in Austria is not a good idea to make friends. Mm. So I was a really lonely kid that talked to trees. And, you know, it can be really, lonely as a kid when no one wants to play with you or talk with you. And so I took a fantasy novel, and that fantasy novel, that was the thing that talked to me the whole time. So I was reading, and it was always fantasy because that was always more naturally to me. So it never comes to my sense to write something else than fantasy, actually. The strange thing is, I became a best-selling author with a romance book, but this is another story. You know, that was a damage. That was an accident. Fantasy is, for me, breathing. It's so much more natural for me. And when I was in school and they taught us, oh yeah, when you're grown up, you can be a cook, or you can be, you know, a waitress, or you can something normal. I felt the pressure of the world laying on my shoulders to be normal. And I went on my knees that day and prayed to all gods that listen to me that I want to have a job where I can work with demons and devils and dragons. And I'm so grateful someone up there was listening to me, because it's for me no more normal to talk about unicorns than about taxes. Yeah, so that's my answer.
I just say, we have mountains and we have traditions is like a poem in and of itself.
Yes, we have that, beautiful. And that's it.
That's great. So I want to answer this like an asshole and just be, there's a really, I, for my sins, used to be an academic, and so the instinct towards pedagogy is obnoxious and strong. And for me, the thing I want to answer the question with is that for me, all fiction is fantasy first. I feel very strongly about this. All fiction is fantasy first, including domestic realism, including like anything that's about, you know, a sad failing marriage, or you know, a joyful experience of, I don't know, the deliquescence of the flesh. There's just like, all of that is fantasy for a reason that I'm going to try and be succinct with. When we make up a story, we are imposing narrative order on the chaos of the world, right? The world as it exists does not have narrative in it. We make narrative out of everything that we see and experience. If someone asks you, you know, so how was your day? You're probably going to make some judicious editorial choices, elide the part where you like stretched in bed, yawned and farted and whatever, and then like, you know, maybe start with an incident, a catalytic incident for like something that you can do to entertain another person who's listening to you. And the act of narrative, like of literally imposing order on the chaos of the world through the means of your will, is the literal definition of magic as we have it, you know. So there is that, but there's also the fact that I feel when we ask the question, why do you write fantasy? The other half, the unspoken half of that is instead of the dominant other genre of reality, but for for the breadth and depth of human history, what we were writing and the stories that we were telling were fantasy. Like the domestic realism is very recent. It's like 200 years old at most. The novel as a form is so recent as a technology, right? And as a means of communicating stories. And I feel like we forget that at our peril, that we have this vast inheritance of imaginary and of just being able to reach beyond our senses to articulate the enormity of our feelings, of our observations, of our relationships, and to kind of see ourselves reflected in the world and look at the world and take it into ourselves and, you know, imagine connections between the stars because we know these connections between each other. Is just the notion that you can look at the stars and see a shape there and build a story out of those things is something that is our birthright and that I think is tremendous and wonderful. And the notion that that is somehow less natural and less obvious a pursuit than writing about, you know, the day-to-day occurrences that we observe amongst ourselves, stripped of anything magical or fantastical, is just very sad to me. So, my sort of jerky answer to it is why don't more people write fantasy? It really, why shear away the layer of enchantment that actually belongs to all of us in order to live a world that is less ornamented, less beautiful, less terrifying, less exciting. So that's my answer, basically.
Yeah, I think it was almost a defense mechanism in some ways, writing fantasy. And I also, for my sins, I also write horror as well. So, but I think fantasy, in the terms of folklore as well, has always been this kind of warning for societal issues. And I think it's so interesting to take things that we're dealing with and we're processing and put it into this place where you have just pure creation and you can twist it and you can, you know, bring dragons in or bring in swords and you can stab the thing. That's great. But I think for me, in a lot of cases, I wrote fantasy out of stubbornness. So it was this whole hole of, first of all, great, you're not going to be an accountant, you're going to be a writer. But not only that, you're not going to be a writer who could ever win awards. You're going to be a fantasy writer. So I really think that I just do it just to anger my wider family. But
spite is a great reason.
Spite is the best motivator. But realistically, it is just something that I love. And I love the joy of creation and the joy of making new worlds and handling things that I don't know how to process in the real world, but I can safely do it through fiction, and making a space for readers that they can safely process things through fiction. And when I say safe, it's not necessarily easy, but just they can read the scary thing, confront it in an environment where it's not actually impacting their day-to-day life, and then move on from it. And that's a great thing about reading as well.
Okay. In my case, when a child, I had a deal with monsters. I had that feeling that I'm really communicating with monsters all the time and that I'm going to be attacked by them. So one day, I said, I needed to go to the toilet or whatever, and I said, okay, monsters, if you don't kill me, I will be making stories about you, because I thought that everyone wants to get into a story, actually. So and I think it was a good deal. And as I was not killed that night, and even the next one, and so on, I did start writing stories about monsters. And then I realized, with passing years, I realized that I need to know more about them. So they partly became kind of the main object of my research. And then I think that actually every child has this entrance to some world of quite a dark world, because we are used to this idea that childhood is something very happy, that it's a happy, nice time full of, I don't know, games or whatever, but actually it's quite a dark thing, especially at night.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of monsters. And most of people, they somehow close this door to this basement with monsters when they grow up, maybe at the age of, like at the age of adolescence. And I paid so much attention to those monsters. I was pretty convinced that there is an extraterrestrial living together with us, and that his mission is to observe me. And I had a lot of communication with him. We were knocking, like I thought that he was sending messages to me. Actually, if I told that to my mother, she would I think she would take me to the doctor. But I was wise enough not to tell her. So, it was like I had a relationship with such an amount of monsters that I just didn't want to close that door. I wanted to have this chance to get to that basement and to have a look at them maybe from time to time, and to write stories about them still. And then when I wrote my first book, when I was 20, if I told you I was 21, that was not true. I was 24. So when I was 24, I wrote this collection of short stories, and those were horror stories. And I presented that book, when it was published, to my best friend. And the mother of this best friend, she just opened the book, because it's the book that the friend of her daughter wrote. And then she said, okay, my friend's name was Julia. Okay, Julia, are you sure you need to continue communicating with that person? Because her soul is so dark. And what she has written, there is no light there. And I really felt, and when Julia told me, I really felt very offended for my monsters, because no one wanted them. Actually, everyone locks them forever, but they're still there, I think. Actually, so if there is someone who can, from time to time, make kind of reports about how monsters are doing, I think that would be a good thing.
Os iba a hacer otra pregunta.
I wanted to ask you another question, but Anna just launched something about a possible question I had. I'm going to open the door to you, just in case you make an example with your own books, or you can answer personally. This is about monsters. Which is the worst monster you can imagine in your fiction or in your life? You can choose the answer. Anna?
Sorry. So I suppose to talk about my own work, which I'm obviously here to promote.
As you prefer.
I mean, I guess the character of Marith in The God of Broken Knives and the Emperor's Dust trilogy more generally, I mean, he is a man who may be less or more than a man. He's actually quite modelled on Achilles and particularly on Alexander. And that notion of having the power to act out the anger that one feels. I mean, I said I had quite severe mental health problems for several years, and that, that moment, I get angry with my children, and that ability to, that possibility that one could lose the bit of you that stops you acting out that anger on your children, or that, I remember that kind of moment, for example, when I was trying for a baby and it just wasn't happening. And everyone says you get this weird thing where everywhere you go, there are like 6 million pregnant people and people pushing pushchairs. And I remember feeling intense anger. And the ability to act that anger out, to be like, I'm going to take your children away from you because you have what I desperately want and cannot have. And again, I mean, fantasy, the fact we're writing about these magical beings, which are, we're writing fantasy is a genre about power. So we are writing about beings of power. Fantasy, very traditional fantasy, the kind of fantasy I absolutely love. It's about, it's about kings, it's about great warriors, it's about warlords, it's about wizards, it's about dragons, it's about things with incredible power. So that absolute fear of writing, but also that incredible sense of relief of writing characters or monstrous beings with the power to act out those really, really dark thoughts you have. My mum is in hospital. My mum was in hospital a couple of weeks ago, and, there's a part of you that's like, yeah, I would, if someone said if I killed every single person in this room, my mum would come home. And there's a part of you that's like, yeah, obviously I'd do that. And the ability to write characters, the monstrous characters that we write, that can do that can act out those intense, absolute moments of hatred and rage that certainly I feel. I don't know if anyone else feels, but that kind of monstrousness. So, I mean, writing Marith for me was writing the kind of, I guess, the sort of, putting all of that into words and writing that kind of complex. But yeah, that kind of nightmare that fantasy is able to give you of the ability to write that kind of rage, destruction, or that kind of ability to put your darkest fantasies into words is, I guess not really an answer, but the only answer I can have, rather than just naming a monster, because all monsters can be either terrifying or really badly done, depending on who's doing them.
Well, my books have a lot of literal monsters. I have a man-eating horse. There's a changeling child who has some self-control issues. There's supernatural spiders. There's a tree that eats lies, and so forth. But evil, or basically, the nearest thing I have to evil in my books is nearly always human. And sometimes it'll be an individual, someone who is particularly callous or willing to sacrifice others to get what he wants. I have one character in Cuckoo Song who is an antagonist who absolutely believes that he is doing the right and compassionate thing. And yes, he is very much the antagonist. And sometimes I have human forces, such as prejudice or panic. As a species, we are not at our best when we are frightened. There is a moment in my third book, Gullstruck Island, where the heroine looks out at a crowd of people who are storming a building and are motivated by racial fear. And all she can see is mob. All she can see is an animal that is almost no longer made of people. It feels like a beast attacking the building and imperiling all the people she's trying to protect. But of course, it is people. That is the horror of those moments. It is people. I won't say how that particular scene pans out.
Yeah, Francis, you stole my answer about all of the worst people in my books are humans. That's kind of the point of all of them, is like you see someone and I label them a monster, and then the humans all point and go, ah, monster, and then the monster points back at the human and goes, ah, monster. Like that's the goal. But not a single character I've ever written is pure evil. It doesn't interest me. I understand it as an act of catharsis, of course, but my main focus point in all of my books is the concept of what makes us human. And so my favorite thing to do is to take a character and long con them, right? So you meet a character in A Darker Shade of Magic, Holland, and you're like, villain. And then by book 2, you're like, antagonist. And then by book 3, you're like, protagonist. Uh-oh. I mean, a character like Sabine in Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, pretty close to as bad as they get. Most fun I've ever had. Right? So to your point, catharsis can also be an incredible positive exorcism, wherein you say, society doesn't allow me to act in the ways I need to act. Sometimes those ways are vicious, sometimes those ways are simply hungry. And so it can be very helpful to have a character who's not bound by the societal constraints. But yeah, I don't write really pure darkness into anybody. It would not make them interesting to me, and I want you to be able to put yourself into each and every one of the characters and be able to live inside them, and I don't think that would invite you in.
I have a very, very similar answer in that I don't even think of myself as writing heroes and villains. I would like for my books to be able to be rewritten from the point of view of the antagonists and for you to root for them. El-Mohtar is the main antagonist in the Greenbone saga, but she has points. And I feel like I could, if I rewrote the entire series from the antagonist's point of view, that you would have a completely different perspective on the events that happened. And to me, that just feels authentic. It feels true to life. I want to trick you, right? And even though I write fantasy, to me, in a way, I don't even feel like a real fantasy author because so much of my fantasy is light touch. And I want you to feel like the speculative element is very ordinary, very part of the day-to-day lives of the people who populate the world. And so I want the world to feel real, and no one agrees on anything in the world. So I don't want my readers to agree either. And as a result, even the characters that my readers hate, right? There are, I mean, Barrow, for example, is a character that my readers hate, but like still, over the course of the series, hopefully I've done my job of making him still seem like a real human being. Even the worst human beings, the ones that you wouldn't want to spend an hour with in a locked room, are still human and have human reactions. And so yeah, I think that to the extent that we're all striving to kind of to reflect real life in our work, and to some extent, you can do that through exaggeration, or you can do that through verisimilitude.
My answer is in two parts, one flippant, one not flippant part. I was once working at the National Theatre as a follow spot, and during the interval of the production of Frankenstein, they had Resident Evil on in the green room for techs. It was bad, but it was full of zombies going, apologies to the interpretation team. And my first job after the interval was to climb these black pet stairs painted black against a black background in complete darkness with a gate that went dong, 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 dong when it closed behind you, and then walk through these completely anonymous black corridors with no signs that just bend forever around the back of the National Theatre. And as I did, my follow spot started to go, not my follow spot, my head torch started to go zhung, zhung, zhung. I just knew. You look to the left, no zombies. You look to the right, no zombies. But when you look to the left, they do that thing. They're just there. So that's my zombie creep out. Non-flippant answer, to follow the trend that is cascading gently this way across the stage. Fuck fascism.
Yeah.
Sorry for the language. And I kind of feel we're all basically saying that at this point, but I'm not a subtle person. But on the note of that, what we are also describing is fascism thriving in fear. Mm-hmm. Fascism makes us scared. The far right makes us scared. It makes us scared of immigrants. It makes us scared of the climate crisis. It makes us scared of poverty. It invents artificial scarcity. It makes us think that all we can do is hold on and survive. And in that fear, it makes it incredibly hard for us to act. We feel trapped, we feel powerless, we feel small against these overwhelming forces. But if we learn one thing from Star Wars, it's that the way you get stuff done is by hoping. The fear is crushing, now more than ever it feels like, but if you hope for a better future, if you want to believe in a better future, that is something that will make you fight. Hope is powerful, fear is a paralytic, and like all monsters, it can be overcome. Woo.
Oh, really nice. That's the only thing you know in German. Es tut mir leid, I'm sorry. Yeah, the thing with the monsters and being evil. I think we humans have a tendency to, we want easy answers for really complicated questions. Yeah. So saying, yeah, that zombie, that's evil. Or that thing, that is evil, you know. When I was writing Blackbird Academy, this is a really, really dark book. It's about exorcism, exorcists fighting against demons. So you say, okay, the demons are the bad ones. And it's true. They are doing really, really bad stuff. And when I was writing the last novel, the heroine, she asked the demon, why are you doing this? What is the purpose behind all of this? Because I wanted to know it too. And the demon surprised me in my own book, and she said, because you know, part of the demons are immortal. And she said, you know what? I just went bored. I just wanted to see what happened when I pulled the trigger. And that's it. I'm immortal, and now you are immortal too. So in one day, maybe you are the evil one, and I'm the good one. Who knows? Who cares at all? So what is evil? I think we as a human race, I say we have a perspective what we think is good and evil. But if you clear all that, all the emotions, when you look up and then you look down, what is bad and what is not? I think this is not, you can have a clear explanation for us, what hurts us, you know is bad. But is someone, when there's God and he's looking down, is he seeing bad stuff? I don't know, so I think there's not clear answer for this. It's a personality trait. Being bad and a monster depends on the person and the situation you are in. So this is my answer.
I've been sitting here listening to everybody and completely fascinated and feeling like there's this bifurcation in my brain of how I want to answer it, because I feel like when we say the word monster, I think that it means a lot of different things. And so when there's the kind of simple answer of like, well, you know, for a long time, I thought the manticore was the scariest possible monster. And then Fonda wrote a book that totally, you know, proved that point. In that you should all read Untethered Sky. It's completely wonderful.
What is a manticore?
A manticore
Can
is...
someone explain it in German?
It's a creature that has the face of a man,
Yeah.
the teeth of a lion, the tail of a scorpion.
That thing.
Yeah.
I think it's quite sexy, to be honest.
This is actually the other problem. It's like you have monsters.
The chimera monster.
Monster, comma, sexy. And monster, comma, mediocre man. Like, you know, there's like, because my flippant answer is that, you know, like in the things that I write, the bad guys are mediocre men. That's just like, but you know, but I do write a lot of hot, monstrous women. And I think they're great. So, like, and I think that what I'm trying to say is that there's, you know, a long history of like queerness identifying with villains and with monstrous figures, because there is something there of recognizing that the thing in yourself that is vilified and that is cut out of society or degraded is something that actually is worth celebrating and recognizing. And when you can see that in an Ursula from, you know, Little Mermaid or something like that, something different is happening than when you are doing what you were describing, Anna, of like, you know, pouring the catharsis of like your most upsetting impulses and stuff into a character. There's something different happening. So on the one hand, I want to highly recommend a very short and beautiful book called Monster Portraits by Sofia Samatar and Del Samatar. If you can find it, it is very short. It's like Sofia Samatar writing these tiny vignettes kind of interrogating monstrosity in response to illustrations by her brother, Del, who is a tattoo artist. And so it's just a very beautiful little book. But the thing I mostly wanted to kind of think about is, in relation to what Claire was saying about fascism in particular, when I look at the world and I see a thing that I cannot comprehend, or it makes me sick to comprehend, like let us choose an example at random, the IDF. So if I think of like someone who is a soldier in an army, who is committing wild atrocities, who is just, without even naming them, just like the worst things that you can imagine a person doing, is doing them with impunity. And then going home to perhaps my country, Canada, and just living a normal life, perhaps being my neighbor, and that I just have to kind of live with the knowledge that this person, who is absolutely without any doubt a mediocre man as well, but like that this person who I have to interact with daily in a normal way has committed these horrific and vile acts, is very difficult for me to just like make fit into the world. And I don't know if I will at any point like touch that with fiction. Because I think that for me to write, I don't know, my brain is stuttering to a stop, because the other thing that I actually wanted to say was to talk about another scary monster. I think, here's what I'm trying to say. There are monsters that we look at as monsters because they scare us. And I think there are monsters that we look at with appreciation because we want to be them, right? And there is something that draws us to them. And for me, those two things are actually not connected. I think they can be for a lot of people, but I wanted to tie that together with reference to one of Claire's books that I super love called Touch, because for a long time, one of the most frightening things to me, like one of the most viscerally upsetting things to me to imagine, was a shapeshifter who could take my shape and go around lying to people who I know, and like just being a shitty person, essentially. Like the idea of someone who could pretend to be me to my family and friends and like be mean to them, or just like in that way that when your friend like says, "Oh my God, I had a dream about you and you were so mean to me," that's horrifying to me. Like I feel like I have to apologize to them for whatever figment they had in their head about me. And in Touch, there is a kind of like person, a creature, or like who used to be human, I can't remember, a condition of being where if they touch your skin, they inhabit your body. And you are, I can't remember, do you swap bodies or do they just get pushed out of it? They just get pushed out into. So this is like a thing that I did not think I would want to read about. I thought this would be too scary for me. And instead, I was absolutely riveted by it because the protagonist, or the point of view character, is so loving, like is just approaches every person whose body they want to take with this enormous care and love. And I think that there is something about like imagining the most frightening thing possible to you and then letting love somehow be part of that equation that, I don't know, it allowed me to just kind of experience it in a different way, but that was strictly reserved for like that fictional moment. Anyways, I just think that this thing.
Amal, te tengo que cortar.
I'm so sorry, I'm talking.
I'm sorry, but I have to move it.
Very little to add.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I feel like it is just that sense to not sum up, because I'm not going to put words in all of your mouths, but it feels like there is this overwhelming sense that the monsters have come home to roost. And the times that I've been afraid in my very, very small town are not the times when I have been afraid of something that I've been taught to fear, but it's been the times that I have come to the realization that either my own privilege has blinded me to something terrible, or that the people who I've always known and have always loved have ideas that I would consider monstrous. Because it is that almost skin-switching aspect of, you know what the person looks like, but you don't actually know what's underneath that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Done.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's really a tricky one, because seems like all the trump cards have already been laid on the table, especially my favorite.
Is that a pun? Nothing.
Especially my favorite about the humans, about humans being much more monstrous than monsters. I actually wanted to share this kind of monsters with you, and I even wanted to tell you about the scene in my novel where there is a human who is torturing a monster, and explaining that he actually has a right to do that because that is not a person, that is a monster. And of course, we as readers immediately understand that the monster is a human being. But all right, I still have, I don't know, a nice 6. I think the monsters that I really use a lot are insects, and especially ants. And I can explain why, because it's not just because I have insectophobia, although I have it, but it's just because those are creatures that really frighten me with this kind of collective approach, this collective mind. This is also very useful for dystopias, and I did use this like ant hole as a metaphor for a dystopia. But this really scares me with this loss of individuality. And when I think about this ant queen who is sitting somewhere there deep inside the ground and somehow smells in a way that all the army of ants obey, I think it's really one of the most scary images that I have in my mind. But I think we're short of time. But I love body shifters.
Oh, wow.
I know we're short of time, but I just want to quickly say that Adrian Tchaikovsky weeps to hear your words. But also, in many ways, I think we've just heard a brilliant defence of fantasy, because you're right, it's hard to describe the mundanity of evil, it's hard to describe the domesticity, and fantasy does it. Like, you elevate it and make it possible to interpret.
That's right. Done. Can I just also interrupt? So I'm not sure I'm just saying about catharsis. I think a lot of, again, it comes back to this sort of notion of why we find the monster appealing. It's not just the catharsis of writing about the fact that some being of great power could do these terrible things. It's the wish fulfillment, the deep desire that I suspect a lot of us have. If I had the power, I would do these terrible things, or at least, wouldn't it be astonishing to have a moment where you could do, you could be a great power of evil. You could just be utterly unconstrained.
Can you articulate then in your mind the difference between wish fulfillment and catharsis?
Well, catharsis is some kind of sense of, catharsis comes from the kind of Greek notion that you feel healed afterwards. So you have the moment of the catharsis, the terrifying moment, and then catharsis is you have the healing afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, there is that deep sense of someone is simply allowing you to. It is fantasies in the sexual sense. You have that ability to feel for a moment. I could do these things. I could transcend any kind of constraints that are placed upon me, and just destroy or just, consume, just wallow in degradation or just be, utterly powerful. And that's not, I then dealt with that and I feel better. It's, God, that felt good feeling that I could be that.
Varias habéis comentado precisamente esa idea.
You've been talking about this idea of anger or of rage and something that comes up from inside, related to the figure of a monster, and with changing the perspective, sometimes only changing the perspective, the figure of the monster change. I can allow you to talk more. I was thinking that I would need about 3 hours to finish my interview to you. I love it because the more we talk to you, more valuable information and beautiful information we get from all of you. Unfortunately, there is no time for a question and answer session. This has been kind of a taste, actually. You've been able to know to meet the authors and see how their books can be. Connecting to Claire's ideas, I will close by saying that it's the first time in the Festival 42 that there is a roundtable made up of women exclusively. And long in the history of literature and no literature, women has been made invisible. I recommend a book of Joanna Russ. I can't remember about the title, but it's about making invisible the writing of women, something like that. It's a great book. And I recommend this book to you strongly. And in this festival, especially where one of the subjects is a reivindication of invisible women. Now they are the first best feathers. 9 of the best authors you've got in front of you, and they are not going to take a single step back.